take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, December 4th, 2020, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. It's also got to be a historic day as the United States House has passed the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, ending criminal prohibition of marijuana if it got passed by the Senate and signed by the president. Yeah, sorry to be Captain Buzzkill here, but it is historic. Let's not get that wrong. It is historic that the MORE Act is passed. It would do a lot of wonderful things, but it still has to get through the Senate, and it's not going to with Mitch McConnell in charge. So we'll talk a little bit about that coming up in the Cannabis Headline News, and we're also going to cover that in Hour 2 when I'm going to go into a deep dive debunking the reefer madness from the Republican members of Congress that tried to stall the MORE Act today. It's you're not going to be able to hear this much longer. You know, as more people come to their senses about cannabis and its utility, these reefer madness lies are going to be passing like dinosaurs. So come to the end of the show, Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. I'm going to talk all about that, bring you a lot of audio from the House hearings today, the debate today on the historic Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. And great to have that expungement part in there too, because people aren't, we were not really ending this war on drugs until the marijuana POWs are freed. And speaking of marijuana prisoners of war, I'll be speaking with Bobby Platshorn today. Robert Platshorn, Black Tuna Gang. You know him from the movie Square Grouper and the Black Tuna Gang, Black Tuna Diaries. He was a smuggler in the 1970s who was busted by the Carter administration, put into prison for a 64-year sentence, nonviolent marijuana offense, 64 years. He served 29 years of that sentence, and when he first got out in 2008 or 2009, I think it was, I met him along with a couple of other marijuana activists, got him involved in marijuana activism. So we're going to check up with Bobby on what he's been doing his past 10 years out of prison, how he's been working in Florida to end marijuana prohibition there, and what it must be like for the people who are on serving marijuana life sentences today, who see all this legalization happening of acts that they got sent to prison for. Covered in the news last week's podcast about celebrities writing a letter to free some of the marijuana lifers, to get President Trump in his lame duck session to issue some commutations to people serving 23 years and more in prison. So we'll cover that in two parts. Part 1 here in Hour 1 with Bobby Platshorn, and then Part 2 in Toker Talk Radio, Hour 2. Also, we'll have some time today to go behind the headlines because I've been doing some research on the state of Idaho. And in doing that research, I found a story from earlier this year. I think it was February of this year. And it's so rare. It's so rare that the police are honest about why they want to keep marijuana illegal. In a case of saying the quiet part out loud, I have a report on a Meridian, Idaho deputy police chief explaining why cops hate marijuana legalization. I think you'll be interested in that. We'll get to that right after the Cannabis Headline News. And at the end of this Hour 1, we'll go into that research that I did. I'm going to do a little rant on Idaho's self-destructive marijuana prohibition, the last state in America to maintain an absolute prohibition on marijuana. And now with the MORE Act passing and the federal legalization on the horizon in 2021, possibly, Idaho looks farther and farther behind the times. So we're going to go into a deep dive on statistics on marijuana use in Idaho, on the need to pass marijuana legalization, what the polls are showing, what are the criminal penalties. We got 15 states now where you can walk around with an ounce in your pocket and it's perfectly legal. What happens if they catch you doing that in Idaho? Specifically in Meridian, Idaho. What are they going to do to you in Meridian, Idaho. All that is coming up today on the first hour of the Russ Belville Show. In hour 2, like I said, we'll get to that, the Reefer Madness part 2 of our Bobby Tuna interview. And at the very end, I got another little mini rant for you because doing some more research online through the social media giant Twitter, I was really shocked to find that Twitter thinks I have a marijuana problem. Me, a marijuana problem. Can you imagine such a thing? You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on Radical Russ Radio. I could use your help to do this. Become a patron of my Patreon page, patreon.com/radicalruss, or just go to radicalruss.com and go all the way down to the bottom of the page. You'll find the links to become a patron and to subscribe to the free podcast in hour 1. We'll be right back with the Cannabis Headline News after this messages. Hi, I'm Radical Russ Belville. You know me. I'm from Idaho, where we've got 2 strains of marijuana, got some and don't. But until I can help legalize marijuana in the Gem State, I can still bring you the best the hemp plant has to offer at Boise Hemp World. Boise Hemp World features the Mama Duck line of CBD tinctures and pain creams and the Billy Dogs line of CBD pet tinctures and dog treats. Hemp World also features CBD candy, gummies, gum, spices, and a whole assortment of tie-dye and hemp clothing and accessories. And under the laws of America's last absolute prohibition state, all Hemp World CBD products are 100% THC free, so you won't fail any drug screenings. Boise Hemp World, now with 2 locations, our flagship store at 6928 West State Street in the Glenwood Shopping Center, and our new location at 1720 West State Street in the Albertson Shopping Center. We're also the headquarters for the Idaho Cannabis Coalition's campaign to legalize medical marijuana in 2022. Find us online at boisehempworld.com or call us toll-free at 844-IDA-HEMP and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Radical Russ here, reminding you that marijuana legalization doesn't just happen. Smart, dedicated activists have put their freedom and future on the line to make it happen. Like the activists at the Drug Policy Alliance, DPA has been fighting to end the persecution of drug users through the enactment of policy that ends criminalization and promotes harm reduction. DPA has also been a backer of many of the medical and recreational marijuana laws to pass in America. Find out more by visiting drugpolicy.org. And keep it here on Radical Russ Radio for conversations with leaders from this organization, the best marijuana music, and the latest news about cannabis. This is your Cannabis Headline News, brought to you every weekday by Radical Russ Radio at radicalruss.com. Your 24-hour source for marijuana music and cannabis conversations. Subscribe today for just $4.20 at patreon.com/radicalruss. With your Cannabis Headline News for Friday, December 4th, 2020, I'm Russ Belville. At 1:13 p.m. Eastern Time, the United States House of Representatives made history.
On this vote, the yeas are 228, the nays are 164. The bill is passed.
That's the official recorded vote tally on House Resolution 3884, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. The MORE Act removes marijuana from the federal list of controlled substances, turning control over cannabis to the states to regulate as they see fit. The act also expunges prior federal criminal records for marijuana crimes and establishes a federal sales tax on marijuana in the states where it is sold legally, the proceeds from which would be invested in programs to repair harms to communities devastated by the war on drugs. This marks the first day since the beginning of U.S. marijuana prohibition in 1937 that federal lawmakers have moved to end the criminality of cannabis consumers. The MORE Act moves to the Republican-held Senate, where it is not expected to be heard. The future of the MORE Act now rests on 2 January Georgia Senate runoff elections, where Democrats could win both and secure a 50-50 partisan tie, broken by incoming Vice President Harris. President-elect Joe Biden has signaled a willingness to decriminalize marijuana, but has authored a plan that would only downgrade cannabis to Schedule II, which would still criminalize non-medical possession of marijuana. WWNY-TV News on Wednesday spoke with the New York State Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley on the prospects for marijuana legalization in the 2021 session.
There's still back and forth, but I expect this will actually get done. I think this got pushed off because of COVID last year.
Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins said last month that she also anticipates that the reform will advance next year.
The conversation has always been what happens to the revenues, how do we include disparately impacted communities in the economy of this industry.
Governor Cuomo said in November he expects the legislature to finally legalize marijuana in the upcoming legislative session because the state needs the money. New York faces a budget gap of billions of dollars in 2021 because of COVID. Today is the deadline to register for the National Cancer Institute's Cannabis, Cannabinoids, and Research Symposium to be held virtually on December 15th through the 18th. This workshop will highlight the state of the science in cannabis, its chemical constituents, that is, cannabinoids, and cancer research, including cancer epidemiology, use in cancer patients, cancer biology and prevention, preclinical and clinical cancer symptom and treatment side effect management, as well as the use of cannabis and cannabinoids as cancer therapeutics, according to the NCI, as reported by Marijuana Moment. Scheduled sessions include panels on the potential clinical implications of marijuana legalization efforts, risks and benefits of cannabis use for cancer patients, the function of the endocannabinoid system as it concerns cancer-related pain, and how marijuana affects appetite, nausea, vomiting, and neuropathic pain in patients. Register online today at events.cancer.gov. Sources report that the National Basketball Association is leaning toward the suspension of random testing for marijuana metabolites in the urine of its professional players for the upcoming basketball season. NBA writer Ben Dowsett tweets that the suspension is due to concerns about limiting exposure of players to others during the COVID-19 pandemic, but that the move could signal broader acceptance by the association of the widespread use of recreational and medical marijuana by players and Americans at large. ESPN notes that there remain only 6 states, Indiana, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Wisconsin, that host at least one of the 4 major professional sports franchises that still maintain prohibition on medical uses of cannabis. Dowsett clarifies that while random testing is out, for-cause drug testing will still be in effect for players who are reasonably suspected of marijuana use. With your Cannabis Headline News for Friday, December 4th, 2020, I'm Russ Belville. Cannabis Headline News is heard at the top of every hour on Radical Russ Radio, and Friday's news is contained within the free Russ Belville Show live podcast. For daily downloads of Cannabis Headline News podcast to your device every morning, subscribe by becoming a patron of Radical Russ Radio.
This is the Russ Belville Show, annoying Kevin Sabet since 2012.
The I Am Cannabis Sativa podcast is now replaying on Radical Russ Radio. Join host Dan Scotland for a review of the news and events in the cannabis community with frequent updates throughout the week. Visit IamCannabisSativa.com to subscribe and check RadicalRuss.com/schedule for show replay times.
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinthgarnell III. Tonight we bring you another classic of the cannabis cinema as interpreted by the Royal Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre Company, 1995's Friday. In this scene, Smokey, played by Chris Tucker, and Craig, played by Ice Cube, are sitting on their stoop, enjoying a cannabis cigarette when they are approached by Felicia, a vagrant consumed by an addiction to cocaine. Enjoy!
What doth thee wanteth?
Oh, verily, I require loan of thine carriage.
What kind of horror is yond? Sugar wouldst be a common request. Ketchup, perhaps. Thou requesteth mine carriage? Hell nay! Begone with thou!
Prithee, sir, bequeath me a reefer?
Thou needest to bequeath employment with thine destitute buttocks. Always one finds thou in theft of others' stash. Begone with thou, Felicia!
Forever shall I recall that.
Recall it, transcribe it, paint it. I have nary a fuck to give.
Craig?
Begone, Felicia.
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinthgarnell III.
You're listening to Radical Russ Radio, content for the cannabis community.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Well, today in the Cannabis Focus, I got to take a look at the state of Idaho. Right outside my window, I can see it. And it's still America's last absolute prohibition state, and I'm digging into why. And I found this article from the Idaho Statesman, the state's largest newspaper based in Boise, that kind of illustrates it. And like I said, it's rare that the police say the quiet part out loud. But in this article, a police officer from the Meridian Police Department makes it pretty clear why cops don't want marijuana prohibition overturned. The article focuses on arrests, bookings, and citations of marijuana possessors in Ada County. Now, Ada County, you don't know Idaho, the geography is Ada County is the biggest county. It's the metro county. It's got Boise. And the second largest city in Idaho, Meridian. And there's about 350,000 people in the county alone. So what they did is they looked at the arrest numbers and they kind of culled through them and made sure that these weren't people arrested for other drugs or arrested for anything violent, right? This is just marijuana. And they were comparing the Boise City Police Department to the Meridian City Police Department. And they found that the Boise cops were twice as likely as the Meridian cops to use their officers' discretion. So they got this discretion thing where you can either arrest someone for weed right on the spot, take them to jail, book them, or you can cite them for the weed, take the weed, send them on their merry way. They got to go to court and face that charge, right? So it's like not being put in jail, but you still are busted for weed. And you still got to go to court. You're still going to go to jail eventually, right? So they found the Boise cops were half as likely to arrest someone and take them to jail. And so to explain this, they spoke to Meridian Police Deputy Chief Tracy Bastareccia, who said his agency must look at quality of life issues when deciding these charges. Quote, "We believe in enforcing the little things. Marijuana is illegal in this state, bottom line. And we're going to enforce those laws because we do believe that when you start to let those little things go, it starts to affect the quality of life in your city." Oh, no. So what he's referring to is this discredited theory called the broken windows theory. This was developed in 1982. Giuliani kind of made it famous in New York City. The idea was, you got to police the little crimes, the littering and the vagrancy and the broken windows and the pot smoking. Because if you don't, it's going to get more and more criminal, right? Well, that was discredited. In the annual review of criminology and in social science and medicine, they found that disorder in a neighborhood doesn't cause people to break the law, commit more crimes, have a lower opinion of their neighborhoods, or participate in dangerous or unhealthy behavior. So it was completely debunked. But the main point is Bastareccia tells on cops. He basically explains why cops oppose marijuana legalization. I'll just read direct from the Statesman article. Bastareccia offered the example of arrests earlier this month at a hotel where police responded to a report of the odor of marijuana coming from a room. While searching the room, officers found multiple smoking devices, marijuana, and methamphetamine. Police also found forged checks, multiple identification cards, and stolen debit cards. The 3 people arrested in that hotel room now face charges stemming from multiple burglaries, both local and out of state. Quote, "The sole number one reason for us being there was a marijuana charge," Bastareccia said, and the case added up to 11 charges for the 3 suspects. Okay, I think we got it. In other words, if this trio of tweaking forgery thieves hadn't smoked marijuana and a hotel guest complained, the cops couldn't have used that magical incantation of, "I detect the strong odor of marijuana," to make those 11 charges stick. Without that telltale smell, the cops would have had to, investigate various burglaries and forgeries and interview victims and collect various clues, follow up on leads, coordinate with investigators in other states, gather warrants to track their movements and maybe eavesdrop on their conversations, collect evidence of the crime in progress, track down their location, go get an arrest warrant, and properly apprehend the criminal suspects. Weed, whole lot easier. "I smell weed. You're under arrest." It's rare that the cops are so honest in explaining why they're only enforcing marijuana laws because they're on the books, because they prejudicially believe that marijuana smokers somehow diminish the quality of life, and mostly because they can't catch real criminals as easily without busting all the pot smokers. Well, I'm sorry, Officer Besterecchia, Chief Besterecchia, and the Meridian Police Department, but we are ending the adult prohibition of marijuana in the United States and including the state of Idaho. And you know what you'll find when Idaho legalizes marijuana is that it's Idaho, but with legal marijuana. Whatever your state was before, there's already people smoking pot there now. And speaking of smoking pot there now, it's 4:20 in the Mountain Time Zone. On this historic MORE Act Day, I light this joint in memory of all the giants upon whose shoulders we stand who weren't here to see this historic act. Too many to mention, and we miss you all.
Almost busted in Laredo, but for reasons that I'd rather not disclose.
I smoke pot, and I like it a lot. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer to use than alcohol. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting responsible marijuana smokers in America. And to learn what you can do to help, please contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORMAL.
The show was long and we was just sitting there, and we'd come to play and not just for the ride.
Radical Russ here, reminding you that marijuana legalization doesn't just happen. Smart, dedicated activists have put their freedom and future on the line to make it happen. Like the activists at NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. NORML activists have helped to end the arrests of marijuana consumers since the first states decriminalized in the 1970s through the latest states to legalize this decade. Learn more about NORML at norml.org and get involved with your state or local chapter today. And keep it here on Radical Russ Radio for conversations with leaders from this organization, the best marijuana music, and the latest news about cannabis.
The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life. Conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay, rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult cannabis prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat.
All right, we're so glad to be sitting here and speaking with a good friend of mine, Robert Platshorn from Florida. How you doing, Robert?
I am doing better than I deserve. My black tuna strain is in 67 True Leaf stores, and it's sold out within an hour.
Oh my goodness. So this is, we better let people know if they're new to the show. Of course, Bobby's an old friend of the show. I met Bobby, was it 2009 as you were getting out of prison?
I think it may even, no, yeah, probably 9.
Yeah.
I got out in 8.
There we
go. The first time I went out with my book, which was the NORML convention in San Fran, is where we met.
That would be it. So folks, if you don't know, Bobby served 29 years of a 64-year sentence for marijuana, nonviolent marijuana offenses that was prosecuted toward the end of the Carter administration. Wrote a book about it. You can read all about that in the Black Tuna Diaries, or check out the movie that was out a little while ago, Square Grouper, which features a segment on your activities there. So I hope I've got that, got those numbers correct, I think.
That's exactly correct. Black Tuna Diaries is in its 9th printing.
Excellent. That's good.
And we haven't done anything to promote it in quite a while.
Yeah.
My other book, Greed and Evil, that, well, if you want to be nice, you could call it a sleeper or a stinker, or it's actually a very important book, but it's all a book of facts. And that just isn't as attractive as the great true adventure stories in Black Tuna Diaries. I mean, it's an important read, but Black Tuna Diaries is a very enjoyable.
Well, it's quite a story, quite a saga for yourself getting out of prison after 29 years for smuggling marijuana. And now that is a legal operation in like 15 states in America. And you even mentioned your own strain in Florida's medical marijuana system. So if you count medical, we're up to 36 states now. How does that feel, seeing that change in your lifetime from being, a marijuana criminal that had to be locked away for the good of the country to being a marijuana entrepreneur?
Russ, I love every second of it. I can't imagine doing anything else or even retiring. I just turned 78 and said, geez, you should retire. I said, yeah, then what am I going to do? This is a lot more fun and a lot more gratifying. I mean, when I started Silver Tour in 2010, after Prop 19 had gone down the drain in California, and that's what prompted me to start the Silver Tour.
And for people that don't know, the Silver Tour is Bobby's educational outreach to seniors to inform them about cannabis.
Yeah, I can remember the night before the elections, you did an all-nighter.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on for a while. I gave you a chance for a bathroom break. All you got to do is ask me a question, and I can tell stories till you get back. But
Bobby is the stairway to heaven of interviewees.
An old pitchman, never run out of stories. But when Prop 19 went down the drain in California, we looked at the exit polls, and it was clearly seniors that made the difference. And that didn't make any sense to me. I mean, we kind of invented marijuana as it's known today. And I figured somebody's got to go talk to seniors. And being a senior and an old pitchman, it was a natural to start the Silver Tour. And we did live shows all over the country, a few out of the country. And then when my parole officer said, no more travel for you, I said, okay, we'll just do it on TV. And I produced a show called Should Grandma Smoke Pot, which was a half-hour version of the Silver Tour. And, I'm an old infomercial producer, so I knew how to get that on TV when nobody else could put pot content on TV. In fact, Silver Tour was the first cannabis nonprofit to be granted that status. Took me about a year.
In the state of
Florida.
Florida.
Then I broke us into the TV market, had it on radio for a couple of years, billboards, and Silver Tour made the difference. I mean, in Florida, the first time we had medical on the ballot, it lost by 1.5%. And that was seniors. This time, when we went on the ballot, after a couple of hundred live shows and a couple of hundred TV airings, we just passed it overwhelmingly. Mm-hmm. And the difference was seniors. And that's the difference in California and most of the other states. You don't have the senior vote, you're just not going to make progress. You're not going to get through. But politicians are scared to death of seniors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that proves out. That proves out with the latest Gallup poll showing for the first time that people over the age of 65 are supportive of marijuana legalization, not just medical.
Yeah. And boy, is that different than even when I got out of jail in 2008, when I got out of prison, it was still a verboten subject. When I put together the Silver Tour show and started calling senior communities, and there are thousands in Florida, I always got the same answer. Our people aren't interested in marijuana, sorry. I said, but look, we're going to give them a free lunch. We're going to bring doctors and patients. No, seniors don't care about that kind of stuff. And within a year, once we got those first few shows, the first one was in a Reformed synagogue, and the Wall Street Journal showed up. And the publicity was excellent. And then we did another one in a big synagogue because Reform Judaism had always espoused for medical marijuana, but they just didn't have a spokesman. And then all the senior community started calling me, hey, come put on a show for our people. And it used to be I'd go in, I'd have a skeptical audience. Now I go in and everybody hollers, hey, Bobby, did you bring samples? So it's been a great life, and it's made a very big difference. And I'm just pleased as punch. I'm just anxious to get out on the road again, but I'm not going to do it until after vaccine.
Yeah, definitely. Got to keep safe. You know, I've got this chart on my wall that kind of underscores what you were talking about. You know, you got out of prison in 2008, and since then, the use rate, the monthly use rate of cannabis by people over the age of 65 has increased over 800%. Now it was a small number to start with. It was like 0.35, and now it's like 3.5. But that's a huge increase in just, a dozen years.
Yeah, and it's really even bigger than that, because in a lot of places, they're still on the black market where they're not counted. They still won't admit to cannabis use because they're afraid to get on the wrong side of the government, or they're afraid they'll lose their pain meds or their gun permit. We've got over 400,000 on the registry in Florida, but that really doesn't begin to encompass people who need it, want it, and should have their cards. But seniors have made all the difference. And I knew in the beginning, all it would take was somebody who knew how to get them out of the closet, because it was my generation that made it happen.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Robert Platshorn, and you can check out his book, Black Tuna Diaries, and the website's still up. Bobby, do you still have the website for?
thesilvertour.org.
There we go.
And then you hit the shopping tab.
There you go.
Yeah, both the books and the movies there. The movie was made by the people who did Cocaine Cowboys.
Yes. Excellent.
And it's called Square Grouper. And the largest portion of it is about us black tuna criminals. Criminals.
Yes. Now,
I didn't know how to spell kingpin, and now I are one.
Now, it's interesting in talking about Florida, you mentioned how the rolls are up to 400,000 for a medical marijuana law that only passed in 2016. And of course, people that have followed my show know that battle was extra hard because the Florida Constitution requires a 60% approval rate to amend the Constitution. So as we look forward, you mentioned the people who don't have the access for one reason or another. And of course, the way to cure that is legalization. What are the prospects for legalizing? I know you're doing work with Regulate Florida and Florida Normal. What are we looking at as far as the prospects of legalization in Florida?
Well, we didn't make the ballot this time, and primarily because we could never raise enough to keep paying a polling company. And you know as well as I do, without a major polling company, you have no chance at all. I mean, we had lots of volunteers. We had hundreds of thousands of signed petitions, but not enough to make the ballot. Florida needed 60 or 70% to get on the ballot, and it had to be from every county. So we didn't make it. I personally believe that the legislature will come up with a recreational motion that'll pass. After all, we're losing so much tourist business to California, Colorado, Massachusetts. Pennsylvania is going to have legalization, going to have rec soon. Just economically, it doesn't make sense for Florida not to have recreational. We're also pushing for reciprocity with the other legal states. And if nothing else happens, we will get it on the ballot the next election.
I would imagine
Regulate Florida.
I would imagine that there's also a lot of pressure given, New Jersey's recent vote on legalizing and how the rest of the northeastern states, of which there are many people who migrate there for the wintertime down to Florida, they're going to not like it to have to leave their legal cannabis in New Jersey or New York and then have to come to Florida where it's not legal.
Especially seniors. They're afraid to carry anything and break the law.
Exactly.
More so than the younger generation. And they still need their meds. There's a lot of people who don't come here because their card's no good here unless they get a Florida card.
What's the expense?
And we've actually lost a lot of college students as well. And that makes a big difference economically to the schools.
Yeah, I can see that.
They opt to go to school in Colorado, Cali. A lot of them go to Mass now. So we need it for our colleges. We need it for the tourist business. But most of all, we need recreational, the patient. There are so many who need it, want it, and are scared to death to put their name on a government registry.
I'm glad you bring
paranoia.
that up. As I often say that recreational marijuana legalization is just over-the-counter medical marijuana.
Yeah, that's why we need it so much.
So I also wanted to talk about, I've seen you online, Facebook and other groups, and people ask you many times about having been imprisoned for almost 3 decades for a marijuana crime and whether or not you have any bitterness over that the government did that and now it's being made legal. But I've seen you repeatedly say that you don't harbor any bitterness about that. Why is that?
Man, life's too short.
Yeah.
I look forward. I love what I'm doing. I love my friends, my fan base, the patients. I don't have time to be bitter. And if you're bitter, you kind of hurt inside. And I can live without that. Plus, I've got the great satisfaction of changing the law. It's my get backs. The parole and DEA offices down here have been cut back radically, and that's very satisfying.
Satisfying indeed. We're going to continue that discussion with Robert Platshorn and thinking about the current marijuana lifers. Bobby did time back when it was federally illegal and illegal in every state. Now, he saw the beginning of medical marijuana and the first states to legalize. So what must it be like for the rest of those marijuana lifers still sitting behind bars as they watch the federal government now voting to end marijuana prohibition? Well, expunging them and expunging their criminal records, setting them free, that would be a good first step, don't you think? When we come back, time for a radical rant. We're going to take a look at Idaho's self-destructive marijuana prohibition right after these messages and a word from the future. Hi, I'm Radical Russ Belville, the sole producer of this 24-hour marijuana music and cannabis conversation stream I call Radical Russ Radio. As part of my mission to educate and entertain people about the need to end adult marijuana prohibition, I produce the Russ Belville Show podcast every week, available absolutely free wherever you get your podcasts. For those of you who'd like to help support my mission financially, you can become a Radical Russ Radio VIP at patreon.com/radicalruss or by clicking the link for Toker Talk Radio in the main menu. For just $4.20 a month, VIPs will receive the exclusive download of Hour 2 of my podcast, Toker Talk Radio, every week, as well as the 5-minute cannabis headline news every weekday. Upgrade to the $14.20 a month tier, and you'll get those podcasts and a set of custom patriotic pro-marijuana stickers from me every quarter. And if you can afford to support Radical Russ Radio at $44.20 a month, you get my podcast, and each quarter you receive a poster, then a mug, then a t-shirt, and finally a hoodie that proclaim your support for ending adult marijuana prohibition. I literally cannot do this without you. Your support enables me to continue my life's work, and I thank you for it. Visit patreon.com/RadicalRuss and become a Radical Russ Radio VIP today.
And now, a brief glimpse into the future.
No way, Grandpa. You're a liar.
You better watch your tone, Squirt. No, I'm not lying. Back when I was your age, policemen would come and dig this up.
The community garden? Why, Grandpa?
Because those flowers there were illegal.
How can flowers be illegal?
Anything can be illegal if enough people say so.
Aren't those the flowers you and Grandma grow for medicine?
That's right. Do you remember the name?
Cannabis.
Good job. But back then, they called it marijuana. And when we were young, if anybody knew you were growing marijuana, the police could come and break down your door and take you away to prison, sometimes for the rest of your life.
Oh no! Grandpa, they're not going to take you and Grandma away, are they?
No, Squirt. Enough people decided a long time ago that flowers shouldn't be illegal anymore.
Oh, that's good. Making flowers illegal was dumb.
It sure was, Squirt. It sure was.
This has been a look into the future.
Hey, Radical Russ here, hoping you'll join me live every Friday at 4 p.m. Mountain for the Russ Belville Show. Each week I bring you the latest news in marijuana, analysis of drug war data, and cannabis conversations with the people fighting for the end of adult marijuana prohibition. I'll also throw in a little bit of stoner comedy and my trademark radical rants. It's the Russ Belville Show, live Fridays at 4 p.m., replayed over the following weekdays, and available as a free podcast at radicalruss.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant. Today in the Radical Rant, we take a look at the state of Idaho, which is rapidly and currently America's last absolute prohibition state. And I mean rapidly becoming even more anachronistic as the federal government even is moving on from marijuana prohibition. Yet Idaho remains stubbornly behind, the only state where possession of any cannabis, including non-drug industrial hemp, including low THC CBD oil for epileptic kids, a hemp leaf, a stem, is a crime that can result in an immediate arrest. And speaking of that low THC CBD oil, Idaho is the first and only state whose governor vetoed a bipartisan law passed to allow non-psychoactive CBD oil as medicine for epileptic children. The only state to look at seizing epileptic kids after neighboring Utah started the trend that led to 17 or 18 or 19 Midwestern and Southern states, very conservative religious places, passing a CBD oil law for kids. Idaho looked at that and went, nope. In fact, the governor at the time, C.L. Butch Otter, in his April 16, 2015 veto statement said, and I quote, "The CBD bill asks us to look past the potential for misuse and abuse with criminal intent." What? Misuse and abuse with criminal intent? This is CBD oil. Ludicrous. CBD oil. He continues, quote, "This bill has the potential to exacerbate health problems of the critically ill and decrease public safety." Insane. So the evidence is in here. Marijuana legalization swept all 5 states where it was on the ballot, both blue states and red states. And folks, it wasn't even close. New Jersey passed legalization, 1 ounce, 67%. Oh, that's a blue state on the East Coast. All right. Arizona passed marijuana legalization, 1 ounce, home grow, 60%. Yeah, it's a blue state, but it's not on the coast. How about a red state, Montana? Big Sky Country passed legalization right next door to Idaho, 1 ounce with home grow, 57%. Well, let's take a look at a conservative religious state, red state, Mississippi. Mississippi passed medical marijuana, 2.5 ounces with no home grow, 69%, even when given the opportunity to pass something more restrictive than that. They rejected it. And finally, the capper, South Dakota, passes medical marijuana, 3 ounces with home grow, 70%, and passes legalization, 1 ounce with limited home grow. You got to live like 50 miles away from a dispensary. 54%. That was the closest one. South Dakota legalization at 54%. Idaho, what are you worried about? That your state is going to become a liberal hippie hellhole like South Dakota? That you'll experience the devastating effects of Billings, Montana? I mean, what are we worried about at this point, Idaho? The rest of the country's moving on. 68% of Americans surveyed by Gallup most recently, nationally, support marijuana legalization. And for the first time, includes 55% of the people over age 65 and 60% of the people over age 50. And it's even close with our traditional opponents. Nearly half of Republicans, 48%, nearly half of conservatives, 49%, and nearly half of weekly churchgoers, 48%, are in support of marijuana legalization. A number that is sure to climb as the federal government begins dismantling prohibition. Even the United Nations this week voted to remove marijuana from its most restrictive scheduling, Schedule 4. And Canada has had legalized marijuana and medical marijuana for a long time. Sky hasn't fallen there. Mexico has decriminalized drug possession, decriminalized marijuana, has had a form of medical marijuana, and is now set to approve recreational marijuana this very month. What are we afraid of, Idaho? Well, a lot of Idahoans aren't afraid, actually. A lot of them aren't afraid. I was working with the Idaho Medical Marijuana Act for 2020 last year and the year before. And so I got my hands on our polling. I actually got the polling that we had done. Got you some numbers. 73% of the people we polled in Idaho back in 2019 supported medical marijuana, and 54% were a definite yes. They gave them these options: definite yes, probably yes, unsure but leaning yes, undecided, unsure but leaning no, probably no, and definitely no. And definitely no was only 13%. And then the pollster went and explained what the medical marijuana would be like, and that support went up to 78% overall support, with the definite yeses increasing to 56%. And the definite no's stayed 13%. So there's about 20% of Idahoans that hate medical marijuana, aren't going to support it no matter what. And they support medical marijuana for chronic pain, 83%. They support having dispensaries, 79%. They support protecting the parental rights and driving rights of patients, 76%. They support a sales tax to cover regulatory costs, 71%. They support a sales tax to fund education and veterans services, 64%. They support possession limits of 4 ounces, 58%. So Idaho's ready for medical marijuana. Is Idaho ready for recreational marijuana? Not sure. Haven't polled that yet. My gut feeling is about the same as South Dakota. My gut feeling is about 52, 53, 54% of the vote would go for recreational marijuana in the state of Idaho. But we shall see. Maybe we just have to tell people what the risks of marijuana criminality are and what the costs are. So you know me, I look shit up. Here are Idaho's criminal penalties for marijuana. Merely being in a room where there's marijuana stored. Like you don't smoke pot, you've never smoked pot, you don't even have any pot on you. You're in your grandson's room, you're in somebody's house at a party, whatever. Merely being in a room where marijuana is stored is a misdemeanor. 90 days in prison, $300 fine. Now, when I mention these penalties, these are maximums. Obviously, they do things like pretrial diversions and plea bargains and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to focus on the maximums because that's the state saying you could deserve up to this amount of punishment. And if it exists, I know it's happening to somebody. Merely being under the influence of marijuana in public is a crime in Idaho. So I live in Ontario, Oregon. I live on the border, right? So like if I'm standing on the west side of the Snake River Bridge and I smoke a joint and then I walk across that bridge, I smoked a joint in a covered tent, by the way, so it wasn't in public view. So I walk across that bridge, in this metaphor, I walk across that bridge over to Idaho. I've committed a crime merely by being under the influence of the legal joint I just smoked? Well, guess what? Every time I go to Idaho, I'm committing a crime because I'm under the influence of marijuana at pretty much every moment of the day, if you're going to define it as THC in my system. Merely renting a dwelling to someone you know uses or grows marijuana is a crime. As a landlord, you're renting to someone, you know they smoke pot. That is a misdemeanor, 1 year prison, $25,000 fine. All right, let's get to the actual, you have marijuana crimes. Possessing marijuana, personal marijuana, up to 3 ounces, misdemeanor, year in prison, $1,000 fine. 3 ounces to a pound, felony, 5 years prison, $10,000 fine. And anything that's a pound or more is automatically considered possession with intent to distribute. Now that is punished as so. 1 pound to 5 pounds, felony, mandatory 1 year in prison, mandatory $5,000 fine. 5 pounds to 25 pounds, felony, mandatory 5 years, mandatory $10,000 fine. 25 pounds or more, felony, mandatory 5 years in prison, mandatory $15,000 fine. And all those can be up to 15 years in prison and $50,000 fine. When it comes to growing the cannabis plants, up to 24 of them, even one, felony, 5 years prison, $15,000 fine. 25 to 49, felony, mandatory 1 year, mandatory $5,000. 50 to 99, felony, mandatory 3 years, mandatory $10,000 fine. And over 100 plants, mandatory 5 years, mandatory $15,000. That can all go as high as 15 years and $50,000 fine. And by the way, suspension and deferral are not available for the marijuana trafficking offenses. You can't get parole until you've done at least the minimum sentence. If it's your second offense, you get double the mandatory minimums. And within 10 years, if it's a second trafficking offense, they can hand you a life sentence for marijuana. Oh, and on top of all that, any marijuana possession conviction means your driver's license is revoked for a year. Your property may be taken by law enforcement, your car, your house, that kind of stuff, if a preponderance of the evidence, not a criminal conviction, a preponderance of the evidence ties the property to a marijuana crime. And if you're convicted, they will take your stuff, guaranteed. And Idaho doesn't have any laws that grant a lot of access to how much is taken and who gets it. So otherwise, I'd have looked that up and told you exactly how much. I'll dig into that a little deeper. And Idaho, despite all this prohibition, all these criminal penalties you're throwing at people for marijuana, you're not stopping anybody. 50% of Idaho's population now lives within a 1 hour drive of a legal pot shop or where there will be a legal pot shop on the border. Your entire western border, Oregon and Washington, has had legal pot shops for a while. Your southern border is going to get one in Twin Falls, Nevada, or in Jackpot, Nevada. Your eastern border, northeastern border with Montana, is going to get him in Missoula and Oneida and West Yellowstone. So anybody that wants weed in Idaho has a less than an hour drive. About half the people have a less than an hour drive to go get it. And trust me, I work in a marijuana dispensary in Sumter, Oregon, which takes an hour over the border to get to. And we got people coming up from Twin Falls. That's another like 2.5, 3 hours away. We got people make 4-hour drives from Idaho to come get marijuana. Let me just give you an example. I can tell you my county right here, Malheur County, Ontario, Oregon, right on the border. We only have one city that has any shops. That's Ontario, thanks to our company footing the bill to get it overturned. You're welcome. Malheur County, in October 2019, just 1 month, and that was about 6 months into sales, but in October of 2019, the city did $4.3 million in marijuana sales, from which that city gets 3% of tax. This last October, 1 year later, it's $8.6 million. It's doubled in a year. The amount of money we're pulling out of Idaho. Now, sure, there's some people shopping in Ontario from the local area, but this is a county of 30,000 people with a town of 17,000. We're pulling them from the 700,000 over there in Boise, selling them $8.6 million of weed a month. Washington State, the 3 counties up there that border the north, panhandle of Idaho there's shops in Spokane, in Pullman, Washington, in Clarkston, Washington. They've been serving for over 5 years. Their average for the last fiscal year was $12.2 million a month. Now, apples and oranges, Spokane's a big city. They're probably selling a lot to people in Spokane. Nevertheless, a lot of money flowing over that Idaho border right into Washington. And it's going to start flowing south over the border into Nevada in Jackpot, a big casino town, a great tourist town to boot. Montana's going to get them, like I mentioned. So you got a prohibition that's not stopping anybody from doing it, Idaho. And then you're losing all this money going out of state from those people. Like, if there is a problem for marijuana smokers, they're smoking it in your state, but the money you could use to fix those problems or deal with them or ameliorate them or mitigate them is flowing out of state. And Oregon and Washington are more than happy to take your money and spend it on drug treatment and veteran services and schools and all sorts of fun stuff. So I took a look at the marijuana arrest numbers, those criminal penalties we talked about. Nobody gets arrested for marijuana. Well, first of all, 9 out of 10 arrests for marijuana in Idaho were for simple possession, not sales or cultivation. 56% of all Idaho marijuana arrests resulted in the suspect being taken to jail. So it's more likely than not that you're going to jail. Half of all drug arrests in Idaho are for marijuana. And it costs, this was the numbers from 2001 to 2010, so it may cost more now, but it cost Idaho police $4,390 per arrest. Per arrest. That's what it costs the cops. Marijuana enforcement racked up costs of over $11 million in 2010 alone. Every time you arrest somebody for marijuana, it costs about 2.5 hours of a cop's time. And like I said, it's not stopping anybody. 8.45% of Idaho adults use marijuana every month. That's about 113,000 Idahoans, or about the population of Meridian. And 13.96% use annually. That's about 187,000 people, or a little less than the population of Boise. And only a quarter of Idahoans surveyed think that monthly marijuana smoking is a great risk. So nobody really is scared of this, except the cops who lose that easy way of busting meth heads in a hotel room or something. It's not increasing the teen marijuana use or teen marijuana disorders. In fact, the rate of marijuana use among 12 to 17-year-olds, while it barely increased like a little over 1% in Oregon and Washington since 2012, it's gone up 11.93% in Idaho. That's right. Teenagers in Idaho their marijuana and smoking has increased far more in relative to their own rates than Oregon's and Washington's. And traffic safety? Idaho has consistently been a more dangerous state in terms of fatality per 100 million miles than the U.S. average or Oregon or Washington. Give it up, Idaho. We got you surrounded. Come out with your hands up and nobody gets hurt. I'm Radical Russ. Stay tuned for Hour 2. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.